1948 to 1958. Could that be the most important decade in all of Bible prophecy? It might just be. According to Luke 21, Jesus gives us some signs of the times. He talks about the end of this age after being pressed about what some of the signs would be. And he goes through the things we've heard, wars and rumors of wars and all sorts of distress and peril from people to governments and all the things that we see play out on the news every single day. But he zeroes in on some specific signs that we are in the last days, or that we are nearing the end of this age. The first thing he talks about that is of interest is about the nation of Israel. Now, we all know that the nation of Israel ceased to be around 70 AD. After decades of unrest, Rome finally said, you know what, we are tired of this constant conflict that the Jewish nation brings to us. Obviously, the birth of the church and all the uproar in the Jewish communities. They had expelled the Jews from Rome, from the empire in 48 AD. So finally, under Nero and Titus, the emperors of Rome, they said, you know what, we're just going to go into Israel and we're going to just raise the place. We're going to destroy it. We're going to destroy the temple. So the epicenter of all this Jesus movement and of all these Jewish communities, the epicenter of what they believe in and the center of their faith, it'll be taken away. So they go in, they destroy the temple. Obviously, it put a halt on Judaism. It didn't stop the growth of the church, because the growth of the church was not contingent to the temple. Rome didn't know that. It was based around Jesus and what he had done and what he was doing through the Spirit. But that brought an end to the nation of Israel. And then Rome came in and to insult the Jewish people, they renamed the place Palestine after their ancient enemies, the Philistines. And from then on, the Jewish people were scattered throughout the empire, and the communities lived on, and they upheld their faith through those communities. But there was no Jewish nation until 1948. We all know World War II and the Holocaust and Hitler's plan the final solution to exterminate the Jews, and how that resulted in the birth of a Jewish nation. And there's a lot more to that. And there was attempts for a Jewish nation before then, but ultimately it came down to 1948. The United Nations, the United States, and the European allies that came together, and they basically just kind of strong-armed this solution into the Middle East, and Israel was reborn. And over the next 20 years, from 1948 to 1967, there was kind of a fluctuation of the property that Israel possessed. They gained more, they gave some back, and now there's still unrest around the territory between the Jews and the Palestinians. And we're not going to get into that in this video, but the idea in Luke 21, Jesus talks about that the times of the Gentiles will be fulfilled, and that Israel will be reborn, that Israel will no longer be under the heel of the armies of the Gentiles, that Israel will be reborn one day. Now, when he's talking about this in 30 AD or so, Israel was an independent nation under the Roman Empire, but they were still their own nation. They had their own government, and even if it was a lot of superficial government, they still had their own semblance of independence. So when he's talking about this, they're thinking, okay, he's talking about Rome being taken away, but of course we know Rome isn't taken away. Rome puts Israel out of business. Rome destroys the nation and disperses the people. So we look at this text, and if you looked at this text between 70 AD and the 1948 AD, you're like, well, this is what he's talking about. Israel is under the heel of the Gentiles. There is no Israel. The territory is there, but the nation isn't there. The Jewish people are scattered. So can you imagine, and some of you were, but can you imagine being alive in 1948 when Israel is reborn, when the nation comes back to life? That's Ezekiel 37, literally played out. The dry bones live again. The nation is back together, and that is the first sign that the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. If you go over and look at Romans chapter 11, Paul talks about this similar subject, where he talks about how the natural branch was removed and an unnatural branch was grafted in, but then the natural branch will be brought back in. And he's talking about this language of Jews and Gentiles, how God focused on the Jews, and now the Gentiles were brought in through the church. But there will be a regrafting in of Israel as God turns his attention back toward the Jewish people. And at the end of this age, when the age of the church, when the times of the Gentiles have been fulfilled, Israel will once again take center stage on God's prophetic plan and God's prophetic activity. So in Luke 21, Jesus is talking about the times of the Gentiles being fulfilled, Israel, formerly captive of all the nations, now they're back. The Jews are back. And over the last 70 or so years, we've seen Israel reclaim their land and in the Six-Day War gain even more land and then be forced to give it back through some of the pressure from the West. And today they're fighting to get possession of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and they're fighting to get possession of what they believe and what biblically is their rightful land. So that's one thing that we should pay attention to. In 1948, that is a major milestone in Bible prophecy. But I mentioned it, the whole decade that should draw our attention because Jesus says after that in Luke 21 that there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars and on the earth, distresses of nations and perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. Now, this might seem really benign. It might seem really generic, but I'll argue that he's talking specifically about something that is as important as the rebirth of Israel. Specifically, that we, over these last 70 or so years, we have had our eyes focused on the heavens in a way that no generation before ours was able to. Yes, there was Galileo and there was the telescope and there was looking into the stars, but what we have been able to do since 1958, or because of what happened in 1958, what we have been able to do the last few decades is we have been given a window into the heavens unlike anything anyone could ever imagine. The ancients looked up at the stars and they observed them and they named them and they charted them, but you and I have been able to zoom past what we see in our atmosphere and get glimpses that are so glorious and so phenomenal and beyond our imagination. So much that we can now predict what's going to happen in the heavens. We can predict when comets and asteroids are going to come and go. We can predict when eclipses are going to happen. We can zoom beyond the Milky Way galaxy and see what's going on in the Andromeda galaxy and beyond. And truly, it's breathtaking. And if you've grown up like me, this is just normal. And the reason we've been able to do this is because of NASA. And even before that, because of the space race that began in 1957. Russia, the Soviet Union, launched Sputnik 1 in 1957, and that is referred to as the beginning of the space age, the beginning of the space race. Dwight Eisenhower in the United States, we organized NASA in 1958. And because of NASA, we have been able to look into the heavens, and we have been able to catch glimpses that are too rich and too amazing for human eyes. Yet, because of things like the Hubble telescope, because of things like the James Webb telescope that is a couple of years ago, we have been able to catch glimpses that are truly inspiring, that let us know just how glorious God's handiwork truly is. So think about this. Jesus talks about it in Luke 21, verse 20 through 24. The times of the Gentiles are wrapping up. Israel is reborn. And right after that, he says, pay attention to the sun and the moon and the stars. Pay attention to the heavens. And you and I have been able to pay attention in ways that no generation before could because of NASA and because of what the space age. And we've actually sent people to space to behold these wonders for themselves. There are people working in the International Space Station. There are private entrepreneurs that are launching rockets into the atmosphere day after day because of what came about because of NASA. Again, 1948 to 1958 might be one of the most important decades in all of Bible prophecy. Here's something else that verse mentioned. There'll be roaring of the sea and the waves. Something that we also have learned because of NASA, because of charting the moon and studying the tide, we've learned that the ocean has been rising in extreme degrees over the last 100 years. And you can debate global warming all you want, but the reality of it is the ocean has been rising. And how do we know that? Because of NASA. And isn't it interesting that Jesus mentions the sun, the moon, the stars, and the roaring of the sea all in that sentence right after the mention of Israel being reborn? So again, I think the most important decade in all the Bible prophecy happened in our recent generation from 1948 to 1958. Israel's reborn, NASA, and all the other space exploration programs come to be. And that's why we know the things that these verses are literally talking about. And he says there after that, that we need to keep our eyes on the Son of Man who will be coming in the cloud. And, being able to observe the heavens lets us know there's a bigger universe out there, that we are so small and so tiny and so insignificant compared to what he is up to. And Jesus says you should raise your heads, you should straighten up because your redemption is drawing near. And then after that, he says that the lesson of the fig tree, that the fig tree, when you see these things begin to happen, know that summer is already near, and that this generation will not pass away until all of this has taken place, or until the Son of Man has returned. You know, in the Bible, a generation sometimes is 40 years, sometimes it's 70 years, sometimes it's 100 years. So could it be within 100 or so years of that most important decade, could that mean the Son of Man is going to return within that 100 years? We don't know. We can only speculate. But I would argue, and these are things that nobody ever talks about. We talk about Israel being reborn, but we never give attention to NASA and what NASA has given us the knowledge about. But Jesus talked about it right there. The signs of the heavens and of the sea. And isn't it ironic that it's because of the foundation and the organization of NASA and the space exploration programs right on the heels of Israel's rebirth that we know these things? And Jesus says, not a generation will pass away before the kingdom of God arrives. So could it be that the most important decade in all of Bible prophecy was not that long ago, and that sets the stage for the end of this age? Something to think about. And as we get these reminders, as the unrest of Israel, as we look at and we hear all the people going crazy about an eclipse the past week, we should always be reminded that the Son of Man is soon to return. Look up. Your redemption is drawing near. Hope this video has been enjoyable for you. Hope it makes you think and get into God's Word and study what His Word says about what we are witnessing right before our eyes. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll share it and let other people join this conversation. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. God bless.